Hi, my name is Val Westover, and welcome to Shutter Speed, controlling light and movement. When you push the exposure button, you are opening the shutter, allowing light to strike the camera's image sensor. When the shutter opens, light passes through and strikes the camera's image sensor. When the camera shutter closes, light no longer strikes the camera's image sensor. When the shutter stays open too long, your image will be overexposed. When the shutter doesn't stay open long enough, you will underexpose your image. When the shutter stays open for the correct amount of time, your image will be properly exposed. What is shutter speed? Fast shutter speeds freeze movement. With a fast shutter speed, anything that moves will be frozen. Slow shutter speeds blur movement. With a slow shutter speed, anything that moves will be blurry. One full stop of light. We can't measure distance by saying from here to there. We measure distance with inches, feet, and miles. We can't measure light by saying, I need more or less light. There's a very easy way to measure light in photography. A stop of light. One full stop of light. What you are looking at below is a ruler. What one full shutter speed of light is next to another full shutter speed of light. Here are some common shutter speeds found on most cameras. Shutter speeds are fractions of a second. When you change your shutter speed by just one full stop of light slower, you have just doubled the amount of light. When you change your shutter speed by one full stop of light faster, you are now taking in half the amount of light. So anytime that you change your shutter speed by one full stop, you will half or double the amount of light that strikes the image sensor. I give a tip in the ISO and aperture courses. If your shutter speed is too slow, raise your ISO. Since we're discussing shutter speed, I probably should expand on it right now. First, would you please circle 1/60th of a second? Now there are more advanced tips on what your shutter speed should be if you're hand holding your camera. But let's agree that if you're going to take a normal picture, not action, with a shutter speed slower than 1/60th of a second, your image most likely will not be as sharp as you want it to be. So from now on, just keep an eye on your shutter speed, and if your shutter speed is too slow, raise your ISO until your shutter speed is 1/60th of a second or faster. My shutter speed when I'm shooting action starts at 1/500th of a second and will go faster depending on the speed of my subject. Kids running up and down a soccer field, 1/500th of a second. Extremely fast action, 1/2000th of a second or faster. The wings of a hummingbird, 1/4000th of a second or faster. When I want to blur motion, my shutter speed starts at 1/30th of a second, and I will select slower shutter speeds depending on the effect that I'm trying to achieve. Fast or slow shutter speeds? As a photographer and an artist, you decide on the effect. To freeze action with the use of a fast shutter speed, or to blur motion with the use of a slow shutter speed. Slow shutter speeds. To create the feeling of movement with water, put your camera on a tripod and use a slow shutter speed of 1/8th of a second or slower. Panning is following and tracking your subject from one direction to another. You can pan using fast or slow shutter speeds. When you pan using slow shutter speeds, you can give your viewer the sensation of movement within your image. This image was taken with a shutter speed of 1/30th of a second. By panning with a slow shutter speed, the photographer was able to create the feeling of movement within this image. Fast shutter speeds. Fast shutter speeds freeze motion. This effect freezes the image and captures a very clear moment in time. On bright sunny days, I will use a faster shutter speed. I need a fast shutter to prevent too much light from striking the camera's image sensor, causing overexposure. Have fun practicing fast shutter speeds with water. Photograph a fountain using your camera's fastest shutter speed, and the water will look like an icicle frozen in midair. Find willing subjects to run, jump, ride bikes, and flap their wings for you when practicing with fast shutter speeds. When you push the shutter release button, you are opening the shutter, allowing light to strike the camera's image sensor. Shutter speeds determine how long the shutter stays open, controlling light. Shutter speed also controls movement. Slow shutter speeds will blur motion, and fast shutter speeds will freeze motion. Anytime that you change the shutter speed setting from one full stop to another, you will half or double the amount of light that strikes the image sensor, depending on whether you make the shutter faster or slower. Shutter speed tips. Number 1. A slow shutter speed blurs motion. Number 2. A fast shutter speed freezes motion. Number 3. Use a tripod when using a slow shutter speed to avoid camera shake. Number 4. Use a slow shutter speed when you need more light. 5. Use a fast shutter speed on bright days when you have too much light. Shutter speed practice. We are now going to do a review. However, we're not done discussing shutter speed. Shutter speed practice material number 1. Shutter speed controls light and movement. Number 2. Use a slow shutter speed to blur motion. Number 3. Would you use a fast or slow shutter speed in these conditions? Action. Fast. Nighttime. Slow. A small aperture. Slow. To freeze motion. Fast. Use a fast shutter speed when using a large aperture. Number 5. Use a slow shutter speed to create movement when panning. Number 6. What is the primary function of the shutter? To control light and movement. Number 7. Each full shutter speed setting lets in half as much light as the full setting before it and double the light of the full setting after it. Eight. Find willing subjects and practice photographing them using all of your shutter speed settings, and compare each image to see your results. To keep your photography very easy while having more control of your exposure, here are 3 things to keep in mind about shutter speed. Number 1. Use a slow shutter speed when you need more light or when you're trying to blur motion. Number 2, use a fast shutter speed to restrict light or when you are trying to freeze motion. Number 3, ISO determines the sensitivity of the image sensor. Shutter speed determines how long light will strike the image sensor. Here's how I suggest that you practice. If you want to isolate shutter speed, you can accomplish this in shutter priority, S or TV mode. This is a very easy mode to shoot in. In shutter priority, your camera will be in charge of aperture, giving you the ability to be in charge of your ISO and shutter speed. How to practice with shutter speed. First, select shutter priority, S or TV mode. Now go outside where it's bright and select a low ISO number such as 100 or 200. Next, we're going to want to blur motion with a slow shutter speed. We're going to select a shutter speed of 1/30th of a second because to blur motion you need a slow shutter speed. Find someone to run back and forth for you. Now practice panning by following their every move and photograph them as they run in front of you. The goal of panning with a slow shutter speed is to have your subject more in focus than in the background. It's okay if your subject is a little out of focus, just as long as your subject is more in focus than the background. Keep practicing and your technique will just get better and better. Here are the steps that I take when panning with a slow shutter speed of 1/30th of a second. Number 1, I put one foot in front of me for stability. Number 2, I hold my elbows in tightly to keep my camera from moving. Number 3, I hold my camera tight to my forehead for stability. Number 4, I now follow my subject's every move and shoot as they pass in front of me. Number 5, I make sure that I'm gentle with my finger when pushing the exposure button. And number 6, I make sure that I continue to follow my subject's every move, even after I take the shot. You must have follow-through. Now let's switch it up. Let's freeze motion. This will be easy. Just use a fast shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, and now all of the movement of your subject will be frozen. You will capture a clear moment in time. By selecting a much faster shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, you will be restricting the light greatly from striking your camera's image sensor. So while shooting in shutter priority, even though your camera is in charge of aperture for you, you must always keep an eye on your aperture before you take your shot. Your aperture should give you some sort of warning in shutter priority if your aperture can't get large enough for the amount of light that the image sensor needs. If this is the case, then just raise your ISO. By raising your ISO higher and higher, your image sensor will become more and more sensitive to light, forcing your aperture to go smaller and smaller, making sure that the image sensor doesn't get too much light. By lowering your ISO lower and lower, your image sensor will become less and less sensitive to light, forcing your aperture to go larger and larger, making sure that the image sensor gets the light that it needs. By understanding and controlling shutter speed, you will have more control of light and the special effects of movement. Now go and spend as much time as you need shooting in shutter priority until you feel that you have a strong understanding about what is happening when you use fast and slow shutter speeds. Remember, all you have to do in shutter priority is select your desired shutter speed, then keep an eye on the aperture. And if your aperture is too small, lower your ISO. And if your aperture is too large, raise your ISO. Shutter speed bonus. Here's an advanced tip on how fast your shutter speed should be based on what lens you're using for sharper images when you're hand-holding your camera. To capture a very clear image when hand-holding your camera for normal photography, not action, use a faster shutter speed than your lens. The more you zoom in, the more unstable your subject or scene become. By keeping your shutter speed faster than your lens, you will have sharper and clearer images. For example, if you notice that your lens is zoomed in to 70mm, then make sure that you're using a shutter speed of 1/125th of a second or faster. As you can see, this keeps the shutter speed ahead or faster than the lens, resulting in sharper images. Make sure that you don't use a shutter speed slower than 1/60th of a second when hand-holding your camera. Use this rule anytime that your lens is longer than 55mm. Just keep your shutter speed ahead of your lens. So, for clear, sharp images of your subject matter when hand-holding your camera, just keep your shutter speed faster than your lens, resulting in sharper images. Congratulations! You have just completed shutter speed, controlling light and movement. You're now ready to move on to the next step, relationship, combining aperture and shutter speed.